Israel Updates with Gadi and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. I'm Gadi in Tel Aviv, and with me is the captain of the Royal Archers Sports Club, Mr. Mike Duran. Shalom, Mike. Once
Shalom,
again,
Gadi,
are you in Washington, D.C.?
I'm in an undisclosed,
Yet again.
undisclosed location. And what do you
He's
call me,
always in the
Mister?
same place. He
I'm
just changes the background. It's all fake.
I'm Dr. Michael Duran. You call me
Dr. Mike,
Mister.
Dr. Mike Duran, Dr. Mike and Mr. Duran are with us on this show today. It's been 2 years and 11 days since the war started, but it seems that it may have ended. Something we predicted that it would do at one point, although we thought that would be about 2 years ago, roughly. So it's been, while we have not been here, the world has completely changed. The question is, has the war ended? Who won it? Are we in a new Middle East? What is it that happened in Sharm El Sheikh? And many other questions on our table. There's also great turmoil in Israel, and we'll also discuss internal politics here. There are very interesting and surprising things, among them the changing political views of the Israeli public and how they may influence the coming election. But first of all, in the service of proper order, why don't we start, Mike, with you putting us in perspective with the headlines?
Okay, Gadi. So on October 14, when I was in India, by the way, U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a charismatic address to Israel's Knesset, declaring the end of the war. And the end of the war with Hamas, and expressing unwavering support for Israel, stating, quote, "I love Israel. I'm with you the whole way," unquote. The speech included compliments for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and a surprise call for President Yitzhak Herzog to pardon Netanyahu amid his ongoing legal troubles. Trump highlighted the peace plan's success, but critics noted underlying tensions, which you and I will discuss in a moment. After the appearance in the Knesset, Trump went on to the Sharm El Sheikh summit. That was on October 13. World leaders convened in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt, for a historic summit endorsing the first phase of President Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan, which culminated in the release. Well, it didn't culminate. The peace plan began with the release of the last 20 living Israeli hostages and a ceasefire declaration. The event was attended by over 20 dignitaries, but notably without Israeli or Hamas representatives. It focused on stability and reconstruction of Gaza, with mediators emphasizing cooperation over the conflict. The summit concluded with the signing of the Sharm El Sheikh Declaration for Enduring Peace and Prosperity. The signatories were Donald Trump, Egyptian President Sisi, Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The entire last paragraph of the declaration reads as follows, Gadi. "In this spirit, we welcome the progress achieved in establishing comprehensive and durable peace arrangements in the Gaza Strip, as well as the friendly and mutually beneficial relationship between Israel and its regional neighbors. We pledge to work collectively to implement and sustain this legacy, building institutional foundations upon which future generations may thrive together in peace," unquote. After that, Gadi, on Monday, October 13, Hamas released the last 20 living hostages who've been in captivity for 2 years, sparking nationwide celebrations in Israel. The release marked the official end of the war under Donald Trump's plan. Of course, we already said that. Over the 4 days between Wednesday and Saturday, Hamas has been executing suspected collaborators and rival clan members in public displays which have been shared on social media. there has been very little outrage expressed on American campuses about that, Gadi. Uh, on Thursday, Donald Trump warned Hamas of potential strikes if it continues executing its rivals. Quote, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them, he said. Later on, he clarified that when he says we, he means actually Israel, not really the United States. Finally, Gadi, in a 60 Minutes interview clip, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff discussed their role in the negotiations that led to the agreement. And they expressed anger and dismay over Israel's strike on Qatar. Witkoff described waking up to the news of the attack with no prior knowledge, feeling, quote, a little bit betrayed, unquote, and noting that the Israelis had bombed the negotiating team. Kushner added that President Trump was furious, believing, quote, the Israelis were getting a little bit out of control, unquote. The full 60 Minutes show will air tomorrow on Sunday. Over to you, Gadi.
Apparently, the grudge didn't last long, did it? With the Doha attack. The Israeli press had a field day on this, saying, see, Netanyahu almost ruined everything. They completely misconstrued everything. It's amusing. We'll speak about this in the last segment, because what's going on here in the press is a whole circus. But first of all, Mike, let's try to understand what is going on in Gaza. Did we or did we not achieve the war aims? We'll discuss that too. But first of all, what is the 20-point plan and what does it mean? Let's start by sharing a map. If I will find the share button here. This is a very nice map by Ben-Zion Macales, which shows us what the situation is. Well, all the yellow area all around is where the IDF was on the eve of the agreement, and this orange line is what we call in the press the yellow line, and this is the line to which the IDF is supposed to retreat. So, if and when all the retreats are achieved in full, what we have is a reduced Gaza Strip, which is now about half the size that it was. It's completely surrounded by Israel on three sides. It doesn't have a border with Egypt, which was the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah passing. And Israel also controls the sea. So, does this mean that Israel has got all its war aims achieved? No, because the first war aim was the annihilation or the dismantling of Hamas as a governing and as a military force. That has not been achieved. The second was the return of the hostages, and the third was making sure that Gaza will never again pose a threat to Israel's security. So, Mike, have we achieved half, most, 75%?
The answer to that question depends on how this whole Trump peace plan unfolds. But clearly, what Israel has achieved is it has ended, for the moment, Hamas as a threat to Israel proper. It no longer poses a military threat to Israel. But what has not at all been achieved is the ending of Hamas as the governing authority in the Gaza Strip. And in fact, all of these clips that we're seeing on social media of Hamas killing its rivals shows that it is re-exerting control. It's using the ceasefire to re-exert control. You know, the Hamas has not returned the dead hostages, the corpses that it's holding on to. And one of the reasons it's not doing that is it's buying time. It's continued leverage over Israel, but it's also buying time, and it's using the time that it's buying in order to kill its rivals. And that's a message to every Gazan, but it's also a message to the would-be interim force that according to Trump's 20-point plan, is going to come in and impose order in Gaza. So they're saying
after dismantling Hamas's, disarming Hamas and making sure that they cannot rearm. How can that be achieved?
well, how can it be achieved? It can only be achieved by Israel, and Israel's hands are tied at the moment.
It's not clear because Trump said Trump has been asked about it, and he said if they don't disarm, someone will go in and do it. I don't remember his exact phrasing. He said someone, but not us. But trust me, it will be quick. So I'm guessing that someone is the IDF. So do they mean a resumption of hostilities?
That's what he's threatening, but does the IDF want to go in and do that? They don't want to go in and do that. There's
The
2 million
IDF,
Gazans in there, and having to go in and control 2 million Gazans and take and take all of their weapons away. That's a very, very messy operation. Lots of Israelis will die. They don't want to do it.
before we get to that, I'm not sure. When you say they don't want to do it, it depends on a question who they is. There is a big faction of Israeli public opinion, and this includes, of course, the many soldiers. When you say IDF, you probably mean the generals. But the soldiers who have from the start supported total victory. This is not total victory. We understand this. But some people say this is not yet total victory. There's, of course, a lot of criticism of the government for signing a deal before achieving the first goal of the war, the first defined aim of the war. But if you look at the map, and let's look at it again, we now have very strong leverages on Hamas, because what we don't see here is how much, this is, by the way, an aerial photograph. So the reason this is all blurred is that it has been almost completely annihilated. This looks completely different, right? These are Israeli moshavim and kibbutzim, villages with their agriculture that you can see. This is the Negev, so it's an arid area. But this is how things look from the air when they are when you actually have things, bricks on top of one another. There's great destruction here and a lot of displaced population. So Israel controls everything that goes in and out of the Gaza Strip, and this is much stronger leverage than we had before. But also, and probably most importantly, there are many displaced persons, and these depend on international aid in order to be temporarily housed or fed or given water and medicine. None of the rebuilding can proceed without Israeli acquiescence. So Israel has a strong leverage on Hamas in that sense. And then, Mike, we have been saying that nobody will disarm Hamas for Israel. So I doubt that any international force is going to come into Gaza in order to implement that important side of the Trump plan. What this means is, and I agree with you that it's not going to be easy to restart the war. We were all apprehensive here because it was clear that Netanyahu was not going to Sharm El Sheikh, and I don't know if you noticed the dance around that.
Let's actually bracket that and talk about. I want to talk about that because there was interesting Turkish statements about that.
All right, because from the Israeli side there was a dance here. Trump allowed Netanyahu to refuse because he had other engagements or whatever whatever he had to do. But Israel now has
holiday. It was the holiday.
Oh yeah, it was a holiday. He couldn't travel because the holiday had begun. So what I expect, Mike, since I agree with you, it's not going to be easy after Trump declared peace all over the globe and held it up to the Nobel Committee and the world public opinion that he's the president of peace. This is what we were apprehensive about. They are going to declare peace in Sharm El Sheikh. He's going to be the president of peace. How can we continue to dismantle Hamas? And it is my guess that we are at a sort of stalemate that gives Israel an advantage, because I don't expect Hamas to disarm, and I am confident that Israel would abide by the pressure levers that the Trump plan gives it and not allow any reconstruction in Gaza, certainly in the area that the IDF controls, except maybe temporary housing, but first and foremost, not allow any material, it's not material, is it? Building, construction material to enter the Gaza Strip. And so the time pressure is going to be reversed. And now the clock is ticking against Hamas, because if it controls the area where there is a huge displaced population and is unable to take care of it except in feeding it and giving it water and emergency treatment, then how is it going to survive if it can't supply what any government must do for its population?
Well, all of these arguments that you're making could have been applied to Hamas at any given moment since October 7th. And yet it's still there, still in control.
How could it be applied before, in any point before? It had Qatari support. It was not isolated. Yeah.
No, it's not isolated now. I mean, I read it quite differently than you. And so one of the reasons I put the Kushner-Witkoff 60 Minutes interview in the news. Trump has taken a position since the UNGA, since the UN General Assembly, where he met with the Turks and all of the America's Arab and Muslim allies. He's taking a position halfway between Israel and the Arab and Muslim allies. You see it in everything he did. He went to Jerusalem, embraced Netanyahu, and then boom, went to Sharm El Sheikh and almost promised a two-state solution. Almost, right? He didn't. He made gestures in the direction of a two-state solution. They're all pushing for a two-state solution, and he's moving in their direction. And now Kushner and Witkoff are going on 60 Minutes and saying Israel's out of control. So Trump clearly wants an end to the violence and doesn't want to reopen the war. The Hamas is going to capitalize on that. Hamas sees an opportunity, one, to stay in power on the ground, and two, to marshal international support for its position. So if Israel opens up, even with American support, it opens up fire against Hamas, then there's going to be outcry from the Turks, outcry from the Qataris, outcry from the British and everybody else. And we're going to hear all the same arguments that we've been hearing for the last 2 years, that Israel is starving civilians, Israel is responsible for the suffering of Palestinians.
I disagree, because first of all, the situation has changed the minute all the hostages returned. Internal pressure would be much lower on Israel. And note that Netanyahu is committing and recommitting to all the goals of the war. So he keeps saying that. Secondly, you now have the Arab parties agree to a plan where it is said that Hamas must disarm or else, and that nothing can move forward unless Hamas disarms. So we now have an international consensus behind the demands that are Israel's goals of the war. And what you're saying is, well, the only way to achieve them fully is by force, and there would be great resistance to that. There would be, but now there is also a commitment by the international community, including the Arab state, including those hostile to Israel, like Egypt, with which we have peace, like Turkey, with which we never had war, but are hostile to us, all backing the plan that says that Hamas must disarm completely and that no arms can enter the Gaza Strip. Is that not a change, Mike?
It's a change. It's an important change, but I think you are focusing on the letter of the agreement and not noticing the mood among the Arab and Muslim allies of the United States, because they are telling President Trump enough is enough. Let's bring this thing to an end. So he got them to agree that Hamas should be disarmed for sure, but that none of them are focused on that at all. And none of them are going to do it. So it really comes down to, is Israel going to occupy all of the inhabited areas of the Gaza Strip and take the guns away from Hamas? That's what it comes down to. And I'm not saying, I think we have to talk about scenarios here. You've described one possible scenario. I'm sure that this is the one that Prime Minister Netanyahu would most like to implement. If he could, because that would allow him to then go into the elections this coming year and tell the Israeli electorate that he achieved all of the goals of the war. So that's what he would like. But he's going to come up against, I believe, Donald Trump. I don't believe Donald Trump is going to easily give him a green light. What's going to happen? It seems to me that the more there's three scenarios, right? Scenario one is Israel gets a green light, goes in, disarms Hamas. Scenario two is on the other end, Israel gets a red light from Trump and says, forget it, just muddle through. And then there's the scenario in the middle, which is what we've always seen, which is Israel will say it has a plan to go in and occupy all of Gaza, and it's getting ready to do it, and it's mobilized the troops, and then there's a negotiation. And that is probably what we're going to see. That's what we've seen since the beginning, and that's probably what we'll see here. Mobilization, negotiation.
Yeah, and I'll point out, I don't want to. It's not a rosy picture. I'm not. We are, by the dynamic of the argument, pushed, I think, to emphasize the differences. I don't dispute that there will be difficulties, but there are still major advantages that are in the deal, and since the Arabs are going to have to play an active role, the reconstruction, the shouldering of the reconstruction of Gaza is largely up to them. And since that depends completely on Israel, because it controls now a large swath of the Gaza Strip itself and completely surround it. If you, I won't put the map back again, but there is no border with Egypt now. There is nowhere to dig and smuggle tunnels. And the agreement seems to be adamant about destroying all the infrastructure, the military infrastructure of Hamas. So what I'm saying is not that Israel would be able to note an infraction on the part of Hamas and then, reignite the whole huge war machine and go in and stomp the rest of the Gaza Strip. What I'm saying is that it has very strong leverages now that it did not have before, and that there is international commitment to them. And so what I expect, Mike, is and I hope that my countrymen will be patient enough, is I think we now have the means to suffocate Hamas gradually. And I hope that we will do it and not be forced to go in by force. We can still look. There are intermediary scenarios. Look at what Israel achieved in Lebanon, as opposed to 1701, which was the terrible agreement at the end of the Second Lebanon War. Israel now
Watch
achieved.
What you say. I helped negotiate that terrible agreement.
Yeah, well, you did a good job, Mike. What's your retrospective view of it? I'll
I
tell
didn't
you what
like
you
it
do.
then.
I'll be your
I
advocate,
say,
Mike. Had it been
I,
implemented, it would have been great. But
yeah.
that, but you, so 1701 stipulated that Hezbollah must disarm. But then the question was, who is going to disarm it? And there was no one to do it. Whilst now, what we have in Lebanon is not total victory. I agree, but the Lebanon situation allows Israel maximum penetrability. Is that a word in English?
Sounds like a good one. I think you just made it up, but
Yeah,
I've
well,
never heard it before, but it makes perfect sense.
I can think of multiple ways to use it, but let's stick with the military. And and the military situation allows us to go in almost freely. So we achieved a ceasefire that binds the other side but doesn't bind us. So if we maintain penetrability in the Gaza Strip, then then we would do something like,
I'm
I'll give you
sorry, I'm
another
a child.
example.
I can't get enough of penetrability.
I'll have a sip of water, and then I'll give you another example from the West Bank. What we did after, what year was Shomer Chomot? You're better than me in
Oh, was
the
that
dates.
2012 or was that 20? I get them confused. I think
Somewhere
2012.
around that, I think, or earlier. And what the IDF achieved in Judea and Samaria was the ability to penetrate the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. So something like a raids policy would still be possible here. So let's see. I'm not saying nothing is done. We don't. This is a very volatile situation. We hear different declaration. I remind you that Trump just said, if they don't disarm, we'll go in and do it, and it's not going to be us. I can't tell you who. He had one of these jokes. He's in a very good mood, obviously. He said, I can't tell you who, but everybody knows who. So.
Yeah,
And
look,
then you take Witkoff's remark, and I say, to say that Israel is out of control for Americans is not just a reprimand for the Trump administration, it's also a way to threaten. And we talked about the unpleasant metaphor of Israel being the Rottweiler on Trump's leash. And he can always shrug and say, well, I don't control that crazy Netanyahu and his and the crazy IDF.
no, there's a bit of that, but clearly they are. Look, I wrote an article. I believe that the attack on Qatar was coordinated with the United States, or maybe let's say the United States was not blindsided the way Witkoff is saying. He's totally surprised by it. I don't believe for a second that the Israelis attacked Qatar without the Americans knowing. And if they did, then it's a huge intelligence failing by the United States, a huge, like massive. But anyway, nothing in the way that Trump behaved after the attack on Qatar suggests that he's really terribly upset about this, including the trip to Jerusalem where he embraced Netanyahu warmly. So anyway, but aside from that, but they need to say these things now as a signal to the Qataris and the Saudis and the Turks and everyone else, the Egyptians, that they are taking the concerns of the Arab and Muslim allies seriously. And that means something. That's not meaningless. So, Trump is engaged in a balancing act between these two. I'm not. I think we both made our positions clear. We don't really need to continue to beat this dead horse. I'm not saying that it won't happen, the disarming of Hamas, but I'll believe it when I see it, because this is a huge undertaking. An Israeli official told me that what the Israelis intended to do was to divide the Gaza Strip into I think I discussed this in our last show, divide the Gaza Strip between an area that will be free from Hamas and an area that will be under Hamas's control. And once they do that, they hope that there will be a migration of civilians into the area not under Hamas's control.
Okay.
That seems to me to be a very, very good idea. a very good idea. I have yet to see that plan being implemented. And my attitude is I'll believe it when I see it. Not that I'm a total disbeliever right now, but that is what is necessary. People keep talking about the defeat of Hamas, but they never show me the mechanism by which it's actually going to be disarmed. It is not going to disarm itself. That's not going to happen.
Last question about that. Do you think Israel was right to sign the deal?
Yeah, basically. I mean, it was very important to get the hostages home. That was very important.
It became.
And
Trump.
look. Here's the thing. There are people at the IDF leadership who say, we go in, we disarm Hamas, and then we pull out, and it grow, and a lot of our men and women die in the process, and then we have to recede, we have to withdraw, and Hamas sprouts back up again. So
Yeah.
Is what we achieve by going in and occupying and disarming it ourselves so much better than what we already have right now? That's the argument. And it's a serious, I said before, by the way, a lot of our listeners in their comments, they disagreed with me about this. I said it's a serious argument. It's a very serious argument. So
I got a lot of fire.
They're going to continue to make it.
I got a lot of fire on Israeli television in the middle of the celebration before the hostages came back. The mood was very celebratory because the deal broke the deadlock around the negotiations for the return of the hostages, because Hamas for the first time agreed to something I did not see coming. Because that's their insurance policy, to give the hostages back before any IDF withdrawal from anywhere. All the deals they put on the table until now was that we would receive the hostages piecemeal, and the full return of the hostages would only come after the full retreat from every last inch of Gaza and the beginning of reconstruction under Hamas. So I was completely surprised by the fact that Hamas took it so. That was. When we heard that, there was celebration in the studios, and one of the things I said, and Mike, you are the defender of the IDF here, not me, or at least I'm the defender of the soldiers, not the generals. I said that we should also mark the amazing failure of the IDF. We should change the whole brass of the IDF. They're all Oslo people, and they could not win the war in Gaza for 2 years against our weakest enemy. That is a terrible, terrible failure, and I hope that we will be able to, in Hebrew we say, change the disk, as if disks are still inserted into computers, but we should change the whole conceptia, the whole frame of mind, and the whole way we build our forces and the way we think about war and everything else. Mike, you usually don't allow me to pass segments. Before you disallow me, I would just say that the two positions that we have taken are only on one side of the map. Nobody on this show is representing the Israeli right. I mean, right of Likud. Because right of Likud and at the edge of the coalition, the other position is, and I've heard it, by the way, not just from right-wingers, a journalist, who's a major commentator who insists that he is a centrist, said, this is Oslo. Netanyahu re-signed the Oslo agreement. We are back to the two-state solution, in piecemeal, of course. So what we call here the right to the right of the right. Have you heard this expression in Hebrew? Hayamin shemiyamin layamin. They are saying, we lost the war. The first war aim was dismantling Hamas, and now we're stopping the war without achieving the major aim. So you can all beat around the bush and say whatever you want, but we have lost the war. So the positions we are taking here are a center moderate right, perhaps, but nobody on the extreme right. The left has a different positions, which we will discuss at the last segment of the show. Mike, to conclude this segment, what would you like to say? Huh?
Yeah. Well, when you said change the disc, it reminded me. We may or may not have discussed this before. My favorite little Hebrew fact. How do you say no,
Thumbnail?
thumb
Yeah, you
drive?
did.
How do you
Yeah,
say
you
thumb
did.
drive? How do you say it in Hebrew?
Disc on key.
Yeah, disc on key. And why does it? How come Israelis use an English term for thumb drive that no English speaker uses?
Because whoever invented it had an international market
Yeah,
in mind. Yeah,
because
but I think you already said
it's an Israeli invention, and they gave it an English name to market it, but the English name was never used by anyone.
yeah. I think you said this. I've heard it from you at least. I
I'm
don't know
going to
if
say it. I'm going to
others have.
say it. I'm going to say it in every episode.
Yeah, no. I suggest 1 in 3, just so it's more fresh the next time. And
Okay, all right.
do you wanna move us to the next segment?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
It's Trump in the Knesset. That was, at every stage of the war. We had an episode like that. By the way, it got amazing rating. We had an episode called "Has Trump Turned His Back on Israel?" And there have been multiple times when we, other commentators, certainly the Israeli left, which was giddy. The Israeli left is eager to cut the nose to spite the face. So any failure of Israel is just a celebration in the studio because it's Netanyahu failed again. Ha! Now look what you did. The Americans have deserted us. And every time we thought this, we ended up surprised by how closely Netanyahu and Trump and Ron Dermer have been coordinating. And a friend of mine whom you know, a historian and a very wise analyst, said, there is no daylight between Trump and Netanyahu, and this, and I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, because if Netanyahu is on board with this peace, we will never dismantle Hamas. But if this means that Trump is on board with Netanyahu dismantling Hamas, so things are very good. But think of it what you may. This was the last segment. This segment is about the speech itself. And I'll tell you, you analyze it, Mike. You'll start. I'll just tell you, since I do screenwriting and work in television drama, I'll give you my view as a drama director.
Okay.
This guy felt totally at home. He just was in his comfort zone. He allowed himself to improvise. He soaked the love. He did not for once worry about all these people. Two people raised signs calling for a Palestinian state, and they were taken out by the Knesset ushers, they're called? Or they're called ushers? So the ushers just took them out. This was Ofer Kasif, the radical anti-Israeli and Ayman Oda, the head of the Israeli Arab Communist Party, and they were taken out. And then Trump complimented the ushers. Did you see that? He said, "Oh, that was very efficient."
How do you say usher in Hebrew?
Sadranim. Seder is order. Sadranim is,
Yeah.
I guess you would translate it orderly, but that's something else in English.
Yeah.
So now what did the speech contain, except the request from President Herzog, poor thing, who stood there ashamed when Trump reprimanded the state of Israel for prosecuting Netanyahu on champagne and cigars.
I thought it was an amazing spectacle. The actual policy content of the speech was relatively small. The main thing was the spectacle itself, and the celebration of cooperation between Trump and Netanyahu, which was a message to Israelis, but also to Trump's critics in the United States as well. I mean, this is an incredible embrace of Netanyahu, and including the call. But it was also, I believe, going back to what we were talking about before, I believe it was a kind of payment, a political payment to Netanyahu in return for the concession that he's calling for. Which is he wants to impose a peace on Gaza, and he wanted some Israeli restraint, and in return for the love that he expressed to Netanyahu from the podium, he expected some restraint in return. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I'll give you a local impression, because I went to see the Netanyahu trial for the first time, because Netanyahu's testimony in his own trial had begun again after the you don't call it vacation, pagra. What do you call it when the court was out of session?
Oh, there's a name for that. When it's I can't think of it. We have a name
Yeah,
for that.
Congress. When Congress is
We
not in
have a
session.
word. We have a word for that.
Yeah, but your Hebrew is obviously better than your English, Mike.
My
So,
English.
so
In
the court
You
resumed
say the
session.
court is in.
Session.
Anyway, yeah, no. But there's when it's not in session, it's in. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
So I went to see it for the first time, and it's a very, very small courtroom, and these are the same journalists, and then you could see the unbelievable difference between politics on a global scale that this man is playing. He's probably the most talented chess player on the scene today. It's one of the most, and an amazing politician.
There's
And
one
then
other
you have-
guy. There's one other guy on his level, I think. But anyway, go ahead.
Is this going to be Adwan?
No, no, no. Although,
I'm
yeah,
relieved, Mike.
Erdogan's pretty high up there, but I think Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan is
Wow.
is,
We know too
is
little about him, but you know more. We should talk about it one day. But you see Netanyahu sitting there, and the prosecution, which has nothing on him, is trying to insinuate that there is some conflict of interest, because there was a conversation 10 years ago in which he was with Arnon Milchan and Shlomo Filber. I have an amazing episode with Shlomo Filber, who was forced to be a state witness against Netanyahu. He was the director of the communications ministry under Netanyahu when Netanyahu was prime minister and minister of communications.
You interviewed him on your Hebrew channel?
Oh, I have an amazing episode. I'll send it to you. Maybe we should.
When did it come out?
2 months ago, something like that. He's one of the best analysts, by the way. I recommend that you follow his Twitter feed. He's one of the best political analysts. Very smart man. And anyway, Netanyahu had to try and remember a conversation of which nothing came out. And they were insinuating that he was potentially involved in a conflict of interest, but Netanyahu said, I was doing what I always did as a minister. I was trying to encourage investments in Israeli media. That's what I was trying to do. And they kept construing this as if insinuating it's something terrible. Now, Netanyahu was also sick, and he has bronchitis. And they keep bringing him tea, and he's coughing, and his doctor said that he needs to rest because he has a state duty, the meeting with officials of other countries in the evening, and he must rest before he does that. And the court doesn't let him go. He said, and they said, can't you continue? And he said, well, I can do half an hour more. And he said, an hour. And these are the judges, and they're sitting there, it's, and you're just, you hold your head and say, what are you guys doing? This is comic.
And this is like his 19th testimony as well, is it not? I mean, how many times has he testified?
I don't know, but in the beginning they forced him to be there 3 days a week for at least 6 hours while he's running a war. And they said it was of the public interest to finish this trial quickly. So, and listen, of course he's a defense witness. They could have changed the order of the defense witnesses. They have a long line of defense witnesses. No, he must be there because, as I said on this show, they're trying to trap him in what they would later call essential incapacitation. Since he's so busy with a trial, he can't run the war. And if he says that there is a conflict, they will tell him, well, quit the premiership so you can tend to your trial and don't tell us about a conflict of interest or a conflict of duties. So this farce is going on there while Sharm is in the background. And the whole thing seems like, I'm sorry for the banal metaphor, like Gulliver is forced to argue with the Lilliputians in an attempt to remember a conversation which nothing came out of with Arnon Milchen 10 years ago. And he kept reminding them. He said, well, I gave them no regulatory allowances. So there's nothing here. What are you talking about? And this went on and on and on I was there for 3 hours. And it's a very intimate court. And when he came in, you had these Kaplan radical journalists.
How did you get in? Can anyone get in? How's it?
If you're a journalist, you can ask for permission to get in. Generally, the public can come in, but there's not enough room, and there's a procedure, and there's a waiting list, and stuff like that. So this is my first time there, and when he comes in, the whole contingent of obviously leftist biased journalist is shouting at him. And the woman next to me was Orly Barlev. She's a radical BDSer. I mean, BB derangement syndrome. What does she ask him? She's, you know, when the president comes or the prime minister comes, journalists are shouting questions.
Yeah.
What do you think she asked?
Hold on.
Prime Minister.
Hold on.
Prime Minister.
Okay, go ahead. No.
Prime Minister, why did you forsake the hostages for 2 years? That was the question. It's just so you know, you look at the Lilliputians and you look at this man is a world historical figure, and the whole thing is just comical. Yeah. So he's friends with the most powerful man on the planet, and then he has to argue with the judges to let him out half an hour or 1 hour to tend to his bronchitis. And of course, the press later said he went to meet some of the returning hostages, that the evil Netanyahu has met hostages with an immune system that has been reduced by long captivity and might have passed on his bronchitis to them. He was not careful to tend to their health. So this is the press we have.
If he didn't go meet them, they would have said Netanyahu refuses to see the.
Of course. This was all coming. So you had a statistic about what Israelis think about the war. So are we moving to internal Israeli affairs, or are we commenting on the?
Do we want to say anything more about Sharm El Sheikh?
Yes, we do.
Let's talk about Sharm El Sheikh, and then.
Why did I think? Here's what my association was, because what I noticed about Netanyahu, and Netanyahu, when he answered the questions, he kept saying that he kept talking about his economic policies as a minister of communication, and also about Milchen's political views. And he said, we don't share the same views, we're friends, but one thing we agree on, he said, that the basis for peace is economic. And that perked my ears, because if you look at the Sharm agreement and what Trump and Netanyahu may have been cooking together, Netanyahu has always viewed peace in economic terms. So we don't know much yet. But I am sure that behind, I'll say it this way, if I understand Netanyahu correctly, and if I understand the Trump policy about which you and I heard together when we interviewed Secretary Mike Pompeo, a major goal of American foreign policy in the region is to bypass the Palestinian veto on peace and economic cooperation. So might I be too optimistic, Mike, to read the Sharm El Sheikh declaration as the first step or the first unfurling of a policy of a plan that would have economics at its center?
I'm sure that this is the Trump administration's idea, because that's always been the approach of the president and of Jared Kushner. But it all hinges on the Kushner approach has always assumed that the economic interests of the Palestinian Authority and of the Palestinians is going to outweigh all of the political considerations and religious considerations that have always been at the forefront of Palestinian thinking. And I have no reason to believe that Homo economicus is going to win out in this.
But I'm not talking about Gaza. I'm talking about Israel's relations with the wider region, which were the focus of the Sharm Declaration. Does not mention a Palestinian state. It mentions, I think, the human rights of Palestinians, but it avoids making anything conditional on a state. And my question is that not an attempt to sideline the Palestinian issue in order to move forward with a larger regional plan? Because if not, then I don't understand the celebratory talking about a new Middle East and a regional peace and all that.
Look, Donald Trump wants to present this to the Middle East, but also to his own domestic audience as a major victory and the beginning of a new Middle East. He wants to do that, and it's not a ridiculous argument, but there are lots of impediments to that vision actually becoming coming to fruition. Since 9/11 down to today, there have been numerous American plans to build a new Middle East. Actually, let's go back before 9/11. You remember the new Middle East that Shimon Peres was?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
right, which was also based on.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't mean to be. Look, I'm optimistic, and I think that this is a major achievement. I think it's a major achievement for Israel and for the United States, and I'm optimistic about the future, reasonably. But the Middle East always disappoints. It always disappoints. I don't want to be negative. You have to look at this in relative terms. Nobody, not Erdogan, not Mohammed bin Salman, not the Qataris, not the Egyptians. Nobody wants the future of the Middle East to be dictated by Donald Trump and Netanyahu, together with Netanyahu. They all want to be. Erdogan wants to be the primary interlocutor with Trump. Mohammed bin Salman wants to be the primary interlocutor with Trump. They all want to diminish Israel somewhat. All of them do. So they're not all joining together. And look at
Erdogan. Let's be clear. Erdogan is actually praying publicly for the destruction of Israel.
Yeah, the Turkish policy right now has two faces to it. Lately. I don't know if you've noticed this. Lately, there have been some quiet movement toward cooperation with Israel. I even saw some press reports yesterday saying that Turkish Airlines was going to return to Tel Aviv.
That would be wonderful, since I've heard so much about the business lounge of that airline. So I'm eager to try it one day.
Have you never been to the business class lounge of Turkish Airlines?
No, I just heard about it from
Istanbul?
you, that it's the greatest on earth.
I plan to retire there. It's going to be.
No, we're not heading for Florida, darling. We're heading for the business lounge of the Turkish Airlines.
Seriously, I plan to retire there. I'm going to camp out right next to the player piano. Anyway, the most upsetting thing to me about the Turkish-Israeli relations since October 7th was the canceling of those flights, which are a very lucrative line, by the way. I think it's Turkish Airlines' most lucrative line or second most lucrative line. I think maybe Istanbul,
Israelis
New York.
go there for hair transplant. Did you know that?
No, everyone does
Cheap
that.
hair transplant.
When you walk around, this is no joke. This is no exaggeration. When you walk around Istanbul airport, there's a ton of men with these weird little paper cover on their head, like Nehru in India had those little what do you call that kind of hat? Anyway, they have their hair covered with these gauze caps. You see them everywhere, because everyone goes to
Yeah.
Are you going to do it? You can go get hair in Turkey. You want to do it?
I'm not inclined.
No. Oh, too bad. Okay. So you go and British people go and get teeth in
Oh, really?
in Turkey. Yeah. You lots of
What else can you get in Turkey? Can you get a kidney?
yeah. You can if you're not careful, you can lose one. If you go to an if you go to an unscrupulous doctor, you can wake up, to get your hair transplanted, and you wake up without a kidney.
Especially if you're Israeli now. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
became
yeah,
dangerous
yeah,
to
yeah.
me.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. So anyway, what were we talking about anyway? Oh yeah, no.
The
So there are two
double edge
faces
of
of
Turkey policy.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a kind of quiet accommodation going on behind the scenes. At the same time, there's a presentation of Israel, a public presentation of Israel, often by Erdogan himself, as the threat to all Muslims, and Turkey as the answer to the threat. He did an interview when he left Sharm El Sheikh, going back to Ankara. He did an interview in which he said that basically Turkey was the face of humanity against the inhumanity of the Israelis in Gaza. He said round about the same time. He said that what Netanyahu had done in Gaza is worse than anything Hitler ever did, and so on. So you have this. Now, why is he doing this? He's playing for leadership of the Islamic world, and he sees the anti-Israel rhetoric, not just for his domestic constituency at home, but also abroad, as an important ladder that he's climbing to be the leader of the Islamic world. So in terms of negotiation with the Americans and in terms of negotiation with the Israelis over with Trump, negotiations with Trump over the whole Middle East, and negotiations with the Israelis over Syria and elsewhere, he sees it. He sees a good reason to be pragmatic with the Israelis, but rhetorically, he's taking a very different position. And both of these things are meaningful, and they translate
And frightening.
into pressure on Donald Trump not to give a green light to Netanyahu in Gaza. That's what it translates into.
All right, let's do the Israeli scene very quickly because we're running out of time, and I do want to also, in the end, reach the dumbest take on the news. And what happened here is, I wrote a piece for JNS for the Jewish News Syndicate, and I also did a short video which you kindly shared about what happened in Hostage Square that stunned apparently Steve Witkoff when he came to what he saw as a celebration of the return of the hostages, and when he thanked everybody, he reached the name Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and got a spontaneous boo so fierce that he had to ask the crowd to let him finish his thoughts. Repeatedly, they wouldn't stop whistling at the name of Netanyahu. If you had originally went to the square, which I won't because I would have gotten beaten there, it's a violent crowd. Then you would have thought you'd stumbled into the Israeli branch of MAGA.
You do think you would be beaten?
Oh yeah, of course. This is a very violent crowd. It's just the police is not enforcing. There's a two-tier police system, and the left gets a pass.
And of course, your face. Just so all of our listeners know, you are very easily identified. You're a well-known figure.
I'm often on Channel 14, and when Channel 14 correspondents go there, they get kicked out. People put placards in front of their faces and disturb them speaking to the camera. They're booed. There's noise around them. And I don't mean that if I walked by, someone would chase me and beat me, but it would easily reach a confrontation that can turn violent. And these people are violent. They've shown it repeatedly. Just recently, one has torched a garbage, trash, and a car outside Netanyahu's family residence. They have thrown a a what do you call nurim? You know, the
A
light
light
bombs.
bulb. Light
A
bulb.
light bulb? No. I mean that what the airplanes drop. That there's a that in order to light an area in the night for military operation, you drop lightning bombs. We call them psatzot teura,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
illuminate very strongly. Someone threw one of these at the prime minister's residence, almost hit one of the guards, and it burned a tree. This is if anyone did that to an American functionary. There was a light incident that someone received a 20-year sentence for in America. I don't remember. Someone quoted it in the press here, but these are extremely violent acts against officials, against the prime minister, and so this crowd can be dangerous. But if you walked into the square that night, which, as I said, I didn't, you would have thought you stumbled into the Israeli branch of MAGA. It was all Donald Trump celebration. And so had Witkoff known more about Israeli politics, he would have known that something is off. A left-wing crowd celebrating Donald Trump is almost a contradiction in terms. And the only reason they did it, because they realized that this was the only way to deny Netanyahu any credit for the hostage deal. The whole line
Right.
was Trump forced Netanyahu, the forsaker of hostages, and imposed on him the hostage deal, which brought the hostages back. This is, of course, complete bullshit, because Trump, as Amit Segal reported in his last column this weekend, he said the hostages were never high on Trump's own agenda. And what put them there is constant pressure by the Israeli representatives, which is, of course, Netanyahu and Dermer, which made it clear that, and I think Trump is more right than Dermer and Netanyahu. I think that putting the hostages so high up on our list of demands completely skews the aims of the war and the moral map, and is self-defeating. It just made Hamas cling to them more tightly, and this was all a terrible move, which we should have bitten our lips and pretended that we don't care, but we didn't, and here we are with a deal. So the sea of pro-Trump signs should have indicated that Hostage Square, which is a hotbed for leftist politics, where they held all their anti-Netanyahu rallies, is a trap. And indeed, I'm sad I don't have it on record, because 3 or 4 hours before the event, I was at my friend's, Omer, and I said, Witkoff is going to thank Netanyahu, and the crowd is going to boo them, and that's a good thing, because they will expose their own dishonesty about the whole hostage campaign, because the hostage campaign was not a campaign to return the hostages. It was a campaign to bring down Netanyahu using the hostages. That is what it was. And so the minute the hostage deal was achieved, the Bring Them Home Now campaign failed. The return of the hostages was the moment of their failure. They lost their weapon against Netanyahu. And what I said in the piece and in the video, maybe I'll stick the video at the end of this show, because we worked hard to do like a 2-minute thing to convey this message. But the central point, I made it more elaborately in the JNS piece, which is called Why Was Netanyahu Booed in Witkoff's speech? What I try to say is that this campaign never applied any pressure on Hamas. The way we achieved the first hostage deal was by withholding aid. They never demand the withholding of aid. The other element was military pressure. They were strictly against military pressure, arguing, wrongly by the way, that if the military come close, then Hamas will murder the hostages. This is we know that this argument is not valid. We know this from logic. You don't discard your insurance policy when you're in danger. And we know this from testimonies of returning hostages who said that they heard the IDF operating overhead often, and nothing happened to them because Hamas was saving them. That it's very clear why. So and even if you just think in the most simple terms, people shouting now are not in any way advancing the return of the hostages or advancing a hostage deal. They're just encouraging to the other side to be more recalcitrant. They're just encouraging the other side to raise the price. And any 7-year-old would know it. And everyone would know it, lest the press has been continuously spreading the lie repeatedly. Like, I don't like to use Nazi comparisons, but this is the philosophy of Joseph Goebbels, which said if you repeat the lie enough, it becomes a truth. And they repeated the lie that Hamas was ready for a deal and Netanyahu was sabotaging it. And it didn't matter that Joe Biden, the then president, Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, other negotiators from the Biden administration, then everyone in the Trump administration, everyone said that it was Hamas that was sabotaging the deal. Hamas did not change its demand for total Israeli surrender. And they kept blaming Netanyahu. And guess what? Ronen Bergman is doing it this weekend in Yediot Achronot. Again, repeating this propaganda line of the left.
I saw it. Does, he's doing the New York Times too. Speaking of Ronen Bergman, how's your lawsuit with Ronen Bergman going?
Not much news, but I think we will have. I'll have news next time because how do you call gishur? You know that when you
mediation.
Yeah. So before we go to the actual trial, we have to listen to a proposal by a mediator. That would be nice. I'm not interested in mediation. I'm interested in a court struggle here because I think that it is our duty to expose what is really going on. So I'll keep you posted when we have any news about Bergman, about the trial. I mean, shall we move to the dumb mistake?
Yeah, why not? Actually, it fits exactly into what you're talking about.
Oh, mine too.
Mine does. Okay, what's yours? You go first.
Mine is Ronen Tzur. Ronen Tzur is the architect of, I think, the Bring Them Home Now campaign. He at least took credit for masterminding the campaign to return Gilad Shalit. And there's a piece by Ronen Tzur where he explained how this whole operation worked. The army to bring Gilad Shalit back, which mastered the public narrative, was all arranged in a way that at the crucial moment, all criticism of the deal was silenced. That's what they achieved. And this is what he was trying to do now. But as I said, the campaign failed. It failed. Netanyahu is still in power. And this was their aim. I don't believe them. They wanted the hostages. They wanted Netanyahu ousted. And this is why they could not thank him. They should have thanked him. If they clamored for a deal for 2 years, he brought the deal. Say thank you. No, because what he did was defeat them. And so they are now in a bind. So as I said, they're giving all the credit to Donald Trump in order to deprive Netanyahu of any of it. And so this is one line of argument. But they also are trying to say that the Bring Them Home Now campaign succeeded in bringing home back the campaign, in bringing home back the hostages.
So they're taking credit.
So who was it?
They're sharing credit with Trump.
Yeah. So, but who was it? Was it Trump who forced Netanyahu, or was it the demonstrations who forced Netanyahu? And I was about to do a little tweet saying their ridiculous argument are going to force them to, in the end, say that the demonstrations in Hostage Square and Kaplan, they were the ones who put pressure on Trump in order to force Netanyahu. And bingo, Ronen Tzur wrote that. He actually wrote it. He said, we insisted on these demonstrations until Trump was pressured to pressure Netanyahu. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure Trump was like, tearing his hair, saying, "Oh, these Kaplan people, they're not letting me sleep. How can I withhold pressure from Netanyahu?"
Where do they go from here?
Oh, it's now Saturday night. They're continuing.
No, what will they? But what
would the issue be?
But they've no, because as you say, they've lost. I mean, the big issue that they pinned everything on is now it's over. So what are they going to? Are they going to go back to responsibility for October 7? Hold him responsible? Is that what it's going to be?
That the National Commission of Inquiry, they're going to
Yeah,
pressure that.
yeah.
The law of conscriptions of the Haredim, they're going to go for that. I think they're going to disintegrate into various messaging and not. And what is most striking, they are now, some of them are saying Netanyahu lost the war. That's the new message. You
Oh, okay,
wanted to
yeah.
surrender to Hamas before Rafah, and now you're saying, these were the war aims. This is one of the other architects, a famous, very powerful advertising agent, has tweeted that. And then you see, I said they don't care about, from the beginning, I said they don't care about the hostages. They want Israel to surrender so that Netanyahu would pay the price. And now you
Right.
see them actually saying it in one of the tweets. It's just so telling. You who wanted us to surrender are now blaming Netanyahu, who achieved a much better deal than you wanted, blaming it for not achieving the goals of the war. Your dumb mistake.
Okay, my dumb mistake is related directly, and it's Steve Bannon, our good friend Steve Bannon. He reacted uh, to the Trump's visit in the Middle East to Jerusalem and Sharm El Sheikh, and he said, "Let me be blunt. This is a massive defeat for Netanyahu and the Israel First crowd." I'm one of the Israel First crowd, I think. Trump just brokered a two-state solution financed by the Gulf states, secured by Arab forces, and implemented under American coordination. And I find this very, very interesting because he's basically on the same tack as your Kaplan crowd, but for different reasons. You remember that just before Operation Midnight Hammer, Bannon went to the White House. Trump received him in the White House, where he told Trump, "Don't become the tool of Netanyahu, starting another major war in the Middle East. So the United States should not intervene." And Trump received him in order, pretending to be listening to the Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson wing of MAGA, but actually using them to deceive the Iranians about whether the United States was going to intervene or not. So Trump pulled the carpet out from under Bannon. It was very embarrassing for Bannon because he went into the White House, presenting himself as a very trusted and important interlocutor with Donald Trump, an advisor. And a couple of days later, he was shown to be of absolutely no significance whatsoever. Trump just used him as part of a deception. This is back at the same time, of course, that Trump also said, why doesn't kooky Tucker Carlson understand that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon? So what Bannon has been trying to do, it's uncomfortable for Bannon to before his own MAGA audience to be so out of sync with Donald Trump and to be seen actually as kind of hostile to Trump and Trump's policy. So what he wants to do is he wants to create a picture of reality that allows him once again to be a trusted interlocutor with Trump. And so he's saying that this was that Trump really stuck it to Netanyahu and really screwed him, because that then means that Trump is actually listening to Steve Bannon. He wasn't listening to Steve Bannon as much as Bannon wanted back at the time of Midnight Hammer, but now the two are into alignment again.
And there are two alignment to the Biden administration policy.
Yes,
More or
yeah.
less. I have a personal grudge there because I interviewed Steve Bannon back in 2018, I think, right after he was ousted, or is it 17? Right out after he was ousted from the White House. I think it was 17. If I'm correct, he was ousted in August or around there, August 17, and he lied to me. He said he's a Christian Zionist.
No, I mean, he didn't lie to you. He probably was that week.
Oh, he was a pragmatic Christian Zionist.
I call people like this serial monogamists.
Opportunist.
They're they're very vehement about their love of whatever they love that week. They're very vehement about it, but then it switches the next week.
I think he just wanted legitimation from Israel at that point. But the one thing, it was an interesting conversation because he's a quirky and strange guy. And I was interested. I wrote his long analysis of the Trump victory and all that. And I got a lot of fire for it, for not calling him a racist. I don't think he's a racist, though he's obviously dabbling in anti-Semitism now. So I'm willing to revise that. But what was striking about this is I completely understood how he was kicked out, because I read a book by Josh Green, a very good book, by the way, hostile, of course, anti-Trump, but still intelligent book by a journalist, Josh Green, in which it's called Devil's Bargain, Trump and Bannon and something. And Bannon just bragged to the press that he's the brains behind Trump. Yeah. And I thought, what an idiot! What an idiot are you to claim that you're your chief's brain?
Exactly, more ego than brains. There's a lot of that around. There's something about Trump. Trump likes to surround himself with highly successful people. Elon Musk, that sort of thing. But then he also likes to surround himself with opportunists. I don't know why. It's one of the odd things about him. And he collects these guys like Bannon, and then they all think that they are going to become his brain. What's his name? Bolton. John Bolton fell into that category too. John Bolton is a very smart man, but he's got a lot of ego, and he believed that he was going to become the Svengali who was going to really be the architect of Trump's foreign policy. And none of them seem to realize that Donald Trump has his own ideas and he's a very talented politician. It's remarkable. They don't just want to be staffers. Bannon had a very important role to play in Trump,
which he didn't.
He didn't play it. No.
Yeah, and another example comes to mind with a big intellect and a big ego. His ego no less big than Bannon's, but his brain's much bigger. Henry Kissinger, who was always careful not to say anything like that. Others said it, but he was really always careful to give every credit to his chief, because he was smart enough to know that his position completely depends on his chief, and he cannot.
By the way, his chief was also brilliant and was totally in control of the brief as well.
Yeah, one of the best presidents in terms of foreign policy, maybe the best. Certainly in the second half of the 20th century. Mike, do we have anything to say about readers' comments? We are going to institutionalize this segment in the near future, because I think it's very important, because people respond in detail, passionately, often say very interesting things. And I'm glad this duty falls to you.
Okay, so yes, we have a number of readers' comments. There's a ton, actually. Unfortunately, we can't, we read them. We can't respond to all of them, unfortunately. I'd like to, because a lot of them are very, very interesting and very high level. Here's from K Kesam 4957. That's KESAM 4957. I'm assuming it's a woman, but I'm not sure. Love your show, Mike. Please listen to Tommy's comments about the Gaza war and Israel in general. He was one of the organizers of the march. This is in London. He's talking about Tommy Robinson. He or she is talking about Tommy Robinson. Of course, there were some pitchforks. So many people, this is in the rally in London. I made a comment about peasants with pitchforks, and so she's mentioning that. So many people can't be of exactly the same ideology, but we need to judge the movement by the organizers. Tommy is a patriot, and he's our friend. So I guess I don't. It's been so long ago. We lost a couple of weeks here. I guess I said something critical about Tommy Robinson.
No, you said something critical about the march, and may I use this opportunity to say that I recorded a conversation with Tommy Robinson, and it would be an episode on this show. in which you are absent, Mike, but we will air it.
Oh yeah, when is that going to happen? Sometime this week?
It was already recorded. I guess it will be an extra episode, so it won't be instead of one of our shows, but like midweek or something.
Okay, yeah. No, I don't trust. I don't trust Tommy Robinson because I think he has a very thuggish side to him and an opportunistic side to him. He's often on the right, making the right points, and I don't deny that. But as an individual, I don't trust him, and I'm glad that I will not be on this interview with him. I realize that Jordan Peterson and other people are taking him very seriously. I'm inclined to stay one step removed from such people. I guarantee you, I'm willing to bet, I will admit it if I'm wrong, a year or two from now, he's going to do something that's going to make us all think, why didn't we see it? Why didn't we see it?
Yeah, well, I didn't want to open this here, certainly before I air the conversation. I'll just say this. For various, first of all, I believe him. I may be wrong. I believe Bannon, and he disappointed me. But I think that and we should talk about this, Mike, because the way our enemies of the Jewish people, anti-Semites, are framing the issues is that Jews in the diaspora encourage immigration, and Israel is cooperating by pushing refugees out of the region and forcing them on the West. This is going to be the line. And so our alliance, we are losing the right. I've heard it with my own ears from an evangelical crowd saying, advising me, friend, if you are going to export, if you are going to go with a voluntary immigration plan for Gaza and send and this ends up sending Hamas people to Europe, then you will also lose the right. So I think the orientation that Israelis should take is to support those who are struggling against illegal immigration and radical Islam and Sharia law and the rest of it, and also and no less importantly, Netanyahu is trying to make the right case that the war that we are fighting is also your domestic war with the elements who want to destroy the West. And Tommy Robinson is making exactly this connection. Is he making it always in the way and the language that I make it or you would make it? Probably not. Probably not. But what people are saying, but people are warning me in other directions, saying, look, you can't trust this radical working class right, because on the third beer you'll discover they're anti-Semites. I don't know any of that. I'm not a mind reader, but I would say that Tommy Robinson is taking a strong position in favor of Israel in the Gaza war, and that unlike Bannon then, it is hard to take this position now. He's paying a price for that, both on the right and on the left in Britain, and he still supports it. So for now, he never said anything anti-Semitic, by the way. He's defended Jews in Luton, his own town. So on that issue, his record is clean, except in his youth when he was for a short while as a very young man engaged with a racist party, the BNP, and when he discovered that they're not letting in people of color, he left. So and this is the record. I didn't mean to go into this whole speech, but since you raised the issue, I'm saying why I think we should at least hear him out. Do we need to align ourselves with him? No, but I think it's worth the hearing.
I'm wary. I hear him out, fine. I don't, lots of people are taking him seriously and listening to him. And in some issues, he's playing a beneficial role. But I am wary of the guy. I'm wary. There's something in him, and there's something in him that I don't trust. And I'll tell you, there's a clip of him at a soccer match in London, and he's walking past a guy, and the guy says something to him, and Tommy Robinson punches him. It goes right to violence. 2 seconds, right to violence. I know the kind of guy. It's just.
Okay, Mike, I suggest we have this conversation again after the episode, and let's hear him out. Let's hear him out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right, Israel update is giving Tommy Robinson a hearing. Okay, there we go. That's
You've distanced yourself from it very clearly. I respect that.
yeah, absolutely. That's so. Okay, here's another Tommy Robinson one, and then
I didn't know I was
uh,
walking into a Tommy Robinson debate here at the end of the show.
and then we have something from Keep USA Safe USA. She, I'm assuming it's a she, but it might not be. It might be a he. She wrote an ode to Greta. Row, row, row your float while ranting in the sea. Terrorly, terrorly, terrorly. Free Palestine's a sinking dream. There we go. That's that's the kind of poetry you get here on the comments section of Israel Update. Wow. Then we have Air Superiority 48. And he has asked, now I'm assuming it's a he, asked you and me a number of questions. Hey guys, I have been listening to your show since the start of the year, and I think you guys are great, and I love your in-depth analysis on the current war. I noticed that you often answer listeners' comments at the end of each episode, and I was wondering if you would answer some of my questions. And then he asked about 4. So I think...
So, no.
So no, we're not going to answer all of them. I'll answer. He has some for you. But here's one for Mike. The current Syrian government under Ahmed Ashara and Hezbollah are well known for historically disliking one another, having fought each other during the Syrian civil war. Given the underlying tension, do you think that there is a possibility of a conflict breaking out between the two in the future? And the simple answer, I think, is no. Because Shara is busy trying to rebuild Syria. He doesn't want to get involved in Lebanon, but he hates Hezbollah and he hates Iran, and he will not allow Syria to become a conduit for support for Hezbollah again. And sometime in the future, if he gets stronger, if he has an opportunity to squeeze Hezbollah, he will do so very happily. And that's very good news for Israel.
All right. Is that all from us for today? We've gone almost an hour and a half. So
well, I guess we should end. I mean, how much can you take of us?
Possibly our longest show. How much of Mike and Gadi can anyone take?
We had a rabbi. I didn't know if it was a real guy or not. But he has a picture of himself as a rabbi. Gave a comment, and he said that we should go do long form podcasts. And he said, "I'm serious." I don't know. He
means a Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast.
Are we going to do that? We just did one.
No, we did half, and I feel that we overdone it. So usually you say at the end that
we're as sane as possible under the circumstances.
No, you usually say like us, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and click the little bell so you can get notifications. Thank you for bearing with us for so long, and we will hopefully be returning next week. Goodbye. The booing must have been baffling for Steve Witkoff. Why would an Israeli crowd gathered to celebrate the return of the hostages boo their own prime minister, who had just delivered a hostage deal that they were yearning for?
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, if you're an Israeli, you would have known immediately. These are the same people of the fringe left who have been demonstrating against Netanyahu forever with changing excuses. Here's one way to explain this to foreigners. You've just witnessed the vocal minority that suffers from the local version of the Trump derangement syndrome. It's called BDS, Bibi derangement syndrome. In fact, these people have both syndromes. These are the same people that produce huge signs of Netanyahu, Trump, and Vladimir Putin in orange overalls and handcuffs, and that was not so long ago. They've called the American president Donald Adolf Trump. So, how come they cheer Trump now and boo Netanyahu? Well, no great mystery there either. Giving all the credit to Trump was the only way to deny it to Netanyahu, because, you see, the Bring Them Home Now campaign was not exactly about the hostages from the very start. It was a way to leverage the hostage issue to bring down the government. So, yes, I'm sure they'd be happy to see the hostages back, but the deal was also the utter defeat of their political strategy. How do I know this for sure? Simple. Not once during the 2 years of its existence did this campaign join the demands to put any pressure whatever on Hamas. They only applied pressure to our side to capitulate, which of course signaled to Hamas to sit back and persevere. In fact, they were working to defeat Netanyahu at the expense of the hostages. Even a 7-year-old would understand that shouting now, now, now would only encourage the other side to raise the price and take its time. Our left, you see, is like your left. It would cut the nose despite the face. But here's the good news. The polls give them no more than 10 Knesset seats. Mr. Witkoff, they were ready for you. They set you up as part of their attempt to steal Netanyahu's thunder, because the truth is that he stole theirs, and they won't forgive him for doing everything they said he can't.